My husband tossed divorce papers at me while I held our newborn daughter in my arms. I wanted a son, he said coldly. Not a useless little girl. His mother stood behind him and nodded. The manila envelope hit my shoulder before it slid off the blanket and landed on the tray table, close enough to the plastic ID bracelet still looped around my daughter's ankle that the tag rattled against the metal rail. 2:14 p.m. She was 2 hours old. I didn't flinch. I was too busy holding my whole body still enough not to wake her. I need a son, Grant said, straightening his cufflinks like a man running late for a lunch meeting instead of standing in a maternity ward. 6 feet from the bassinet, a nurse had wheeled in an hour earlier. Not another responsibility dressed in pink. My arms were still trembling from 22 hours of labor. An aftershock I couldn't will away, no matter how still I tried to hold the rest of me. Nora, I'd named her while the anesthesiologist was still packing up his cart before Grant had even come back from wherever he disappeared to during the delivery, slept against my chest, one fist curled under her chin. No idea yet that the man standing over her hospital bed had measured her worth before she'd opened her eyes long enough to see his face. Behind him, his mother lifted her chin the way she always did, right before saying something built to leave a mark. This family needs a grandson, Vivian said. Fortunately, another woman has already succeeded where you failed. The door swung open. Celeste walked in wearing a fitted charcoal dress that had clearly been chosen for this exact moment, one hand resting over the small, deliberate curve of her stomach. She didn't look at Nora. She looked at me the way you look at a chair you're about to take. It's a boy, she said. 12 weeks. For a second, the fluorescent lights seemed to tilt sideways, and I understood with a strange, clean clarity that felt almost like relief that I was watching 3 people perform a scene they'd rehearsed somewhere without me. I refused to give them the collapse they'd driven 40 minutes across town to witness. Grant set a pen down on the rolling tray beside my IV line. Sign these. I'll let you keep the apartment 3 months. You should be grateful I'm being reasonable. I looked at the papers. Then I looked at him. Really looked the way you look at an old photograph and try to place the face. And thought about the 29-year-old man I'd married 6 years earlier, back when he owned one suit that actually fit him and more student debt than he could say out loud without his voice cracking. He'd forgotten who'd co-signed that suit. He'd forgotten a lot of things. I was starting to understand that he'd once sworn he never would. 3 months, I repeated quiet. Vivian smiled the smile she used at charity luncheons, the one that never touched her eyes. A woman raising a daughter alone should learn some humility. I bent down and kissed the top of Nora's head. Then I picked up the pen and signed. Not the settlement page, only the line confirming I'd received the documents. Grant didn't check which line I'd signed. He laughed, kissed Celeste in front of the nurse, changing my IV bag, and walked out with his mother trailing 2 steps behind, already talking about nursery colors. The second the door clicked shut, I pressed the call button. I didn't know it yet, lying there with my newborn daughter and a signature that meant nothing, legally binding. But that was the last afternoon anyone in that family would underestimate me by accident. After that afternoon, it would be a decision they kept making on purpose, and every one of them would eventually have to answer for it in a room with cameras on a day none of us had picked yet. I'd spent 6 years learning to disappear into the background of my own marriage, and I was good at it. Good enough that I sometimes forgot I was doing it. We met at a fundraiser I hadn't wanted to attend, the kind of event my father used to drag me to, so I'd learned to read a room. And Grant had been the only person there who talked to me like I was a person and not a Kessler. He was 29 then, sharp-jawed, underslept, wearing a suit with a hem that had been let out once already. He told me about a device he was trying to get funded, a wound closure clip that could cut surgical infection rates, and he talked about it with his hands, knocking over a glass of Proco halfway through. And I remember thinking, this is the first ambitious man I've met who isn't performing ambition for an audience. I was wrong about that eventually, but it took years to be wrong about it. And by the time I was, we had a house, a marriage, and a habit of loving each other that had mostly calcified into logistics. The early years were good or good enough that I still don't like remembering them because it would be easier if none of it had ever been real. We got married in my parents' backyard, 40 guests, a rented arbor. Grant insisted on assembling hymns.